Welcome to Off the Pitch with Erik and Pula, Season 2, Episode 2. We have a treat for you today. Scott Cooper, the head coach of Jamshedpur, the man playing a high line, not just on the field, but possibly off the field as well, gives us his insights to all things football, and the man who signed me in Thai football with Muang Thong. We got a chance to speak to him just before the international break.
Erik, you ready?
Let's go.
Football management is it's a privileged job in a sense where you don't always have to come back with an answer to a management, but you can come back with questions. And what are the top questions you asked the Jamshedpur management before you signed on the dotted line? What were the prerequisites for you to say, okay, I'm going to take this?
Really, now in football, especially in Asian football, for me, the number one priority is know who you're working for. Know what their input is and what their stance is on football. What I mean by that is recruitment selection, whether there's interjection from the board or there's interference, or from candidates. So some of the things I just ticked off on my book were, is there any management on the bench? Will I be getting slips of paper under the door saying play this guy? Will I be told that we've signed this guy, here he is? People are paid on time. They leave you to do the job. I meet the board every week or 2 weeks. There are a couple of directors above me that I speak to after games. They're not at the training ground. There's no interjections before, during, or right after games, which is some of the things that you have to kind of look at. Then you look at the budgets and ambition. Do some more things. We've got to up our game a little bit, both on and off the field, a little bit to stay with the front runners. There's no doubt about that. And so, but I think, I met the board last week and they were fantastic. We talked about players, we talked about, targets for players, we talked about, the team. They're not unrealistic thoughts coming out of the boardroom.
You signed me 9 years ago at Muang Thong, and we had a couple of games together.
Yeah.
And then, poof, you were away. You left me. You left me high and dry. What happened?
Yeah, well, I actually remember meeting you the first time in the Nova Hotel when you came down for breakfast, and I remember you there. And to be fair, you were ideal, what we wanted at the time. But at that stage, I'd just left Fener United, and I was about to sign in Japan.
Yeah.
And I was at the villa in Bangkok, and Muang Thong asked to meet me, so I went to meet them, and. Let's just say it was very difficult to do the job and pick the players that you wanted where I was at the time, and it's not something. I'm always an advocate of being responsible for my own future, and putting myself on the line, and that's not something I was willing to do.
I can understand the unsteadiness of Thai football. You worked with Fener and Ericson. That must have been an amazing, stint for you. Any nights out? Any cool stories from those footballing times?
Well, I worked with him at Leicester too. So
wow.
I worked with him at Leicester originally, and I remember picking him up a few times from the hotel in Leicester. But when he came over to the Philippines, it was a great signing for us. He brought such vast knowledge and experience. He just had a great calmness and coolness about him, no matter what the circumstances. So, yeah, we had a few nights out to relax and unwind a little bit. It was always a fun guy, but always he was like quietly serious, and very calm. And nothing fazed him, and he was like that throughout his whole career, wasn't he? So I sat sometimes and wondered, just would anything upset him, because it never seemed to.
Scott, you were at Buriram, of course, and that's like, Erik tells me, it's 4 hours away from the main cities. It's in the middle of nowhere, one might say. And Jamshedpur, of course, as you mentioned early on, just a couple of hotels. The city is far away. It's not like a typical place where you can get away or switch off from the sport. Um, what is it like in terms of the similarities between the two? Did Buriram teach you how to deal with Jamshedpur in a more easy way, efficient way?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, kind of. I mean, since then, Buriram's really come on because the owner of Buriram United is also he's a political figure and he's done a lot for the actual region. So they've brought in airports which we don't have in Jamshedpur. They've got a couple of malls. He's built hotels. He even built like a motorbike circuit track that's on like in the international circuit too. So he's done a lot. But when I was there originally, it was still developing. So it was a few small malls. So it was similar in that sense that it was great that you could focus on the football. Buriram United had its own training academy and training flatlets really where players lived, which is what we do in Jamshedpur. So it's similar in that sense. It's something it's not something I haven't experienced before. So in that sense, you can get down to work. Players are always at your beck and call, and
Yeah.
there's no excuse for lack of training ground preparation.
At Jamshedpur, is there allowance for your players to get away for a bit? Do you allow them that night out or a little relaxation time? Is there permission for them to probably go away to a Kolkata or something if they want to after a difficult game? Because, sometimes it could become an overdose of just working.
Yeah, you're spot on. The potential issues where 90% of your players live at the flatlets where the training ground is, the gym is, the physio is. I'm in and out of. You've got to be careful that you don't suffocate them in the world of football, and they have to have time away as well. And so I'm very cautious of that with the staff as well, to leave players alone. They have a different floor and things like that. But you have to find ways to break that up and give them the time off. And you've got to be careful that the players have got to be able to unwind. They've got to be able to go out. But the thing is in Jamshedpur that there's only like about 8 or 9 restaurants that players, international players and other players would frequent, and so it always gets back. You always know where they've been. Somebody will tell us. So generally they have to leave the city, and so we're just cautious about making sure that we don't suffocate them.
In terms of your own career, Scott, you've coached for quite a while now, and you're still a young man. With the license situation, is that something you've put off till now, or has it just become apparent that you need to go and touch up a few things and get your credentials done? Because you hear a lot of coaches that go and get these things done in the international breaks all the time.
Actually, I leave tonight to conclude the pro license, the AFC pro license, which is probably better for me rather than trying to do an equalisation process, which I'd done before, which was a minefield of trying to get the license read and equalised, and there was certain things didn't make sense, and so it was just better to do it this way. So it's not really it's more of a formality for me in that sense, and on the course, I'm with a lot of coaches that are just trying to find a way in the game and stuff like that. And so it's been quite, you pick up some of the new science and analytical stuff. So you're always learning, right, coach? So
Scott, you've been around in Asia, and you've worked. I was going through a list of players on transfer market you've worked with in terms of nationalities, and it's incredible. But here's a question that we in India continue asking. And of course, there's the other way where a Japanese player comes to India, and there's an example in Tachikawa. But what is holding back Indian players from being scouted by clubs in Thailand, South Korea, even Indonesia? What is holding? We know the transfer market is broken here. We know that the payments are incredible. But beyond that,
yeah, I mean, generally the top teams. I mean, I'm lucky to be at Muang Thong United, Port FC, and when you're looking for that Asian player, that plus one player, which is an AFC rule, you're going to try and find, you know, an Erik, or you're going to try and find a Korean centre back, a Japanese player. You're going to try and find someone that comes in with strength and credibility, add value added to it. The Indian national team have made great strides, but is it enough strides on an international level for coaches to prick their ears up. Is it enough strides in the AFC Champions League for us to take notice of that? And so the same can be asked of of other players. Now in Thailand they have the ASEAN rules, so that any player from inside the ASEAN community counts as a domestic player. So you can go get a Vietnamese player, you can go get a Filipino player, you can go get a Cambodian player, and similar levels, similar quality as Indian players to some level. And then when you look at the Asian play, you might look at an Australian, you might look at an Iranian, you might look at a Korean, a Japanese player. So I'm not quite sure really if they've got that grip on them on the perspective of coaches yet, in terms of we need to really go find an Indian player. Generally speaking, when you're coaching an AFC team, you'll think we'll go get a Japanese player because they'll be technical, they can get box to box, they play J1, J2. A Korean will be disciplined, fit. I mean, I'm generalising a little bit. An Australian, you can get a powerful lad that's good in the air, like a European mentality to them. But you can't really. There's no blueprint for an Indian player in that sense. And so until they start making bigger strides internationally or through the Champions League, I don't see that day coming anytime soon. ISL clubs, they don't sign I-League players too often. They stay within the ISL. And I'm thinking, why? I'm looking at players here, decent players. The same with the academy structures. We brought young Sanan in from his academy this year. And there was people were skeptical a little bit about him. Will he spend time in the reserves? And that was never my intention. I thought he'd always make the travelling squad, and he's got something to add.
Now, you've got players that were there from last season. TP Renesh, Pratik was there, Ricky was there, all in that back line. What fascinates us is that we've trademarked your high line, unfortunately, and everyone's picking up on it. I'm sure you hate that. But for us, it's fascinating because it's the most bold, stark difference that we've seen in any team this year that's decided to do something different. And we weren't expecting Jamshedpur to play this high line. Was that something that you arrived to the training ground and said, I've got a plan in place, I'm going to do this? Or have you seen the players and gone, I actually have to play this way?
No, it was really, this is who I am. This is what we're going to do. I want players to fit in with this. There's players here are technically capable, they're willing, they're physically able. And so for us, it was about being proactive rather than reactive. And I've obviously watched games, I'd watched players, I'd cut hours and hours of video on every single player. So I knew technically or athletically what they could do. I knew what we wanted to add. I knew it might take 2 or 3 transfer windows for us to get to where we want to go. But, why am I going to wait for 2 or 3 windows to start being what I want us to be? And therefore, we knew that we would come out, and we knew that at times it might cost us. And we knew at times, it might look like it's too courageous, kamikaze, if you like, at times. People might think like that. But for me, it was, I want to get this club to the way I want us to play as fast as possible, even if it means that we run the risk early on, because players now are bought into it in training. I'm having to hold them back from pressing. We're trying to get the ball around as quickly as we can, and 1 and 2 touch football and getting it into the last third. There's still so many layers and levels to go with the squad, and some players individually. It's a lot of work that we're putting in all the time with players individually and as a collective, as a team, and just keeping us going. I mean, the example would have been we played Northeast after receiving many injuries. Again, a lack of preparation for the next game. We travelled at 3 a.m. in the morning. Just don't get me started on that one. And we get in there for a few days. And so this is the only game we went into kind of like a mid-block, which, to be honest, I find boring myself.
Scott, would you have been able to do the same at a club which would expect more? And this is no disrespect to Jamshedpur, but imagining you coming into probably a Mohun Bagan in East Bengal, maybe a Bengaluru, and knowing the pressure of expectation is so result oriented that you might not have the freedom to take a risk, to say, oh, I'm going to really push for a risk. We might drop a few points, no problem, but we are going to go for it. Does being at Jamshedpur, is that the perfect club for you to actually go for that risk, to take a gamble? Would you have done the same at a bigger club where the expectations are slightly higher?
I would have done the same for sure. Um, I would have definitely done the same. But that's the whole point of going through your process, isn't it? About speaking to the club about what they're expecting. The club know what we're working towards. I've even given them the vision of after 10 games, after 20, after 50, after 100, this is where we should be. This is the type of football you should be seeing. This is the type of play you should be delivering. No, I would say some of those clubs you've mentioned would be easy for them to adopt that because they've got the national team players with experience, especially the team we just played last. I was so impressed with so many Indian players in that team that it was the right way for us to approach it. Why would we sit back and let good players have space and time in our own stadium?
I'm sorry, I'm stretching this point, but when you got the lead against Mohun Bagan, and we were having a chat at halftime as well, that what is he going to do now? Is there a temptation to sit back, protect the lead, or are you going to keep going because, hey, there's 3 points for the taking, Scott, and you know that Sahal would open you up. You knew that Manveer and Liston would make. There would be points when the high line would be broken, when they would go past the offside trap. At what point does philosophy turn into stubbornness for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess I am quite stubborn in that sense. But what I would say is at half time, trying to sit on a lead like that against Montbagan, it's not going to happen. We talked all week about space and time. If we give them space and we give them time, they're going to feel comfortable and their quality is going to come through. So, what do you do? Give them space or time, or do you go with a high line? So they're both risks. We sit back. For me, the best thing to do is get the second goal. That's the best thing. Get the second goal. And then if we get into a last 15, 20 minutes, how we defended against North East United for the majority of that game is a great learning curve. It's something that we can tell the players, that's not something you can expect for us to start a game with, but it could be something you could expect to finish a game with at times as well. And so ideally, the second goal would have come. You might have seen us drop into that type of shape and try to frustrate. But even at that point, still breaking out into the occasional press to mix it up as well. So,
sorry, Pula, just quickly. In terms of, there's a lot of drama in Indian football, and in case you haven't seen it yet, the last 20, 30 minutes, the game's become so stretched and there's chaos ensuing. I remember playing in Thailand with Muang Thong, and there were 3 or 4 times where a penalty had been called. A coach would walk the team off. They'd walk all the team off. They'd come back on. The goalkeeper could stand there. The ball would go past them. It was farcical, right? The refereeing. I'm predicting that the refereeing standard's gone up in Thailand since then. It's frustrating. I can see all the coaches in the same vein on the sideline shouting and bawling. What's going on with the refereeing decisions? Is there a case for putting VAR here? Because obviously the referees are missing a lot of things and it becomes quite frustrating. Would that help the game here, or do you think it would just make the game slower?
I mean, first part, the Thai refereeing has improved a lot. The games are controlled. When a game's finished, it's 99%. That's what the score should have been, right? When you finish a game here, I don't know, because many of the goals, the most major decisions or missed decisions, it makes you wonder. You could play this game 10 times and there'd be 10 different outcomes, in terms, not the result, but scores, red cards, yellow cards, penalties, offside goals, non-penalties, set pieces in the box where there's about half a dozen fouls every time there's a set piece, and so for me, we have to look at it, objectively and say that when these games are finished, is that a true reading of actually the rules? Have they been administered correctly? And the answer obviously is no, because many of the major contested parts of the game right now I'm seeing that they would be reversed in many areas. Our penalty, for example, the last game, Steve Amber, is outside the box. It's not a penalty. I'm not just belly aching about what's happened to us. And I feel bad for I've said to the officials, I'm sorry for you guys, because how you need help. It's not right, this. And if you think about Indian players going into the AFC Champions League or going into the Asian Cup, the way in this league people conduct themselves from set piece. I've always, and this, for me, one of the reasons I signed you was from your quality in the air as well, and the set piece is a big thing. I'm struggling to find a way to get players free from set piece because everybody is being held. There's at least 4 or 5 penalties every set piece. If you freeze framed that and went through every set piece, you'd see 4 or 5 penalties. And these players playing in this league then go and play in the AFC, or they go play in a national team. Then what do? Are they going through the same thing? Are they going to get penalised? And so, for me, it's a problem of it's not a problem of fairness or parity. For me, it's just about the reality of, should that have happened? Yes or no? And quite often it's a no. That wasn't correct. And give the officials an opportunity to go and have a quick look at it, or get in touch with the VAR and see if it's right. Will it slow the game down? Possibly. And for a while there'll be a lot of cards dished out and there'll be a lot of reverse decisions, but they'll be correct.
Yeah. So Scott, sorry mate, how do you coach that then? You're talking about set pieces and exactly what you mentioned there. Let's not touch anybody inside the corners, or when someone runs at you in the box, just don't touch them. But they're getting away with it now because VAR isn't there. Are you coaching them to do these things already, or are you just saying, hey, let's bend the rules because the referee can't see it?
Well, I mean, if things aren't being applied, you have to apply them yourself. For example, in an offensive corner, that 4 or 5 of your players are going to be held. And so how do you run screens? How do you run patterns? Because everybody's been, so we've had to put people inside the 6-yard box and swing it right in there, almost like into a swamp or a forest, because we know at least it's going to be in that area. I've had to take 2 players off the ball, out swing or in swing, where you keep the people guessing. Why would you go out swing anymore when you're never going to get a decent connection? You have to, so everything's got to be on the frame. Then you speak to your players inside the box saying, you're going to be held, don't let yourself be held. So it becomes a wrestling match. So now, as a set piece coach, if you were one, you'd be saying, put everything on the frame and look after yourself in the box. If you're going to be held, you make sure you're not held. And so it becomes a percentage game where you're sticking things on the frame of the goal because at least it's on the frame. And secondly, you're telling players, if they're going to hold you, you make sure they don't. And so it just becomes a constant wrestling match. And it's not set piece as I know it or as I want it to be. But we're having to tailor it based on that.
Scott, let's come to you as a person. And it seems like you're a risk taker in general. What are you jumping off cliffs with a bungee rope? Are you going down into those, those caged sharks in Cape Town? Like, what are the big risks in life that you've taken, football-wise? Is that your personality?
I think it is. I mean, I like to, I like to be proactive. With football, I've always tried to coach that way, front foot football. I think that's the way football's going in any case, so I think it's suitable to me. But don't get me wrong. I mean, in that sense, there's a lot of emphasis in the way we work defensively. It's just a higher line defensively. There's responsibility defensively. Our strikers and midfield players are always getting it from me on training about closing doors and getting their angles correct. And so that's that. So you could look at it as risk taking, I suppose. On a personal note, no, I've come here to India. I guess that's a risk from one Asian league to another. I took on a national team as a risk. Outside of football, I've done some Ironmans and triathlons and things like that, just to keep myself on a challenge, which to learn really how to swim competitively, how to how to bicycle, how to put all those sessions together. I did a few of those. Not anymore. I was doing them in my 40s, but I think that's the way I am. I prefer to be proactive in life rather than reactive.
So let's think about it's fascinating with crossing paths almost 10 years on, and if we were sitting in that hotel in Bangkok talking, having lunch with Darren that day and thinking about in 10 years time, would we be in this situation, you coaching in India, I'm doing commentary and TV work in India. Let's try and fast forward another 10 years. What does Scott Cooper want to be doing at that point in time, in 10 years time?
Yeah, good point. I mean, when I signed you, I wouldn't have known what the future held really at that stage, and so yeah, in 10 years' time, I'd still say I've got about 10, 12. I don't want to be doing it too late in life. For me, I would think I'm be on my last days there. I would like to think that I haven't won enough titles. I know that, and that's what I want to do. I want to win trophies. I want to put some legacies down in some places. And I want. It doesn't have to be the easy way. The easy way would be to sign for Mumbai or Mohun Bagan, right, and have all the players delivered to you in person. So I want to be able to do that. I do enjoy Asian football. I think I understand Asian football because I understand how critical the domestic player is. And that ties into finding you right. Having good eyes in terms of youth players or players like Imran Khan, for example, converting to a left wing back and things like that. So, I'd like to think there's a good 10 years for me. I'm hoping that there's a fair few years at Jamshedpur, and then who knows? I would like to. I passed on a couple of opportunities to go back to Europe, into Spain, into Scandinavia to coach, and at some point, maybe that call will be too much to resist. So,
Scott, in football and in life, what are you most proud of?
to be honest, nothing gets me more prouder than my own family. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. I'm lucky. I've got 5 wonderful kids. I'm so proud of them, all of them. I've got an amazing wife who supports me constantly. I'm one of the few lucky people in life that's found a person that they're supposed to be with. And every day I'm blessed like that. And so for me, I'm most proud of who we are as a family and what we do with each other. And we support each other, and so for me, it doesn't go any further than that. And
Right. And when did you decide you're going to wear the Chinese collar on the touchline in Indian football? What made, is that always your fashion, or did you go to a shop and you said, "Oh, that's something
sorry,
I'm going to wear, a black Chinese collar, game in, game out"?
that's Zara, mate. That's Zara. That one, No, but you know what? The black shirts have gone. Some of the club said to me, Scott, we've been playing well every game, but the black shirts have been a bit unlucky. I
Oh
thought,
man.
you know what? I wore that black collarless shirt twice, and it's gone wrong. And the other black shirt. So we're going to stick to white, or I might stick to green or turquoise. But you won't be seeing that black shirt again. It's been shelved. It's going to stay there. So, but the color might stay the same though. Huh? It might stay the same. You never know. That was me a little bit before. I used to like the shorts and tracksuit, but I'm getting a bit too old for the shorts.
Well, that was Scott Cooper in episode 2, and I'm sure he's not that old. He could possibly wear whatever he likes on the sideline, but we've loved watching his side play this year, the new revamped Jamshedpur, and it was just great to hear the insights of what he sees Indian football and how it can become better. Stay tuned for episode 3.